Hey everyone, so this is a very special day for me because this is the very first ever all-wheel drive BMW M4. Now, traditionally, the M3 and M4 have been rear-wheel drive, so purists were sort of uneasy about the idea of them getting all-wheel drive as an option. However, after driving the rear-drive versions, I personally felt that all-wheel drive might actually improve the experience. So now, I actually get to find out. And as always, if you like this video, please subscribe to our channel, click the little like button, it helps with the algorithm, and click the little bell icon so you get notifications for whenever we post new videos. So this is it. This is the BMW M4 xDrive. Now this, along with the M3 sedan xDrive, these are the first all-wheel drive M3 and M4 models in history, and that's a big deal. For years, the BMW M3 and the M4, after that it started to exist, were kind of behind the 8 ball in terms of like grip and all-weather performance to a lot of their competitors. Audi was starting to really clean up in the US because there are a lot of markets in the US that prefer all-wheel drive. So Audi sport models became a little bit more popular than M cars in a lot of American markets. So the introduction of an all-wheel drive version of these cars is actually extremely helpful to BMW because it allows BMW to sell M cars in those areas. Now, enthusiasts for a long time really kind of fought back the idea of all-wheel drive in the M3 and M4 because of the fact that typically all-wheel drive is not seen as the enthusiast's choice. Enthusiasts want rear-wheel drive. They want the added dynamics rather, instead of the added grip of all-wheel drive. They want that sportier balance of just rear-wheel drive, and I understand that. Typically, rear-wheel drive cars feel better to drive than all-wheel drive cars, historically. However, BMW M's xDrive specifically is very, very, very good, and we learned that from the M5. So I was very optimistic about this car, especially after having spent about 2 weeks in the standard rear-wheel drive M3. Well, it was the standard M3 and then the M3 Competition. Both are rear-wheel drive, and both, despite their differences in power, are quite the handful. And despite their incredible agility, could feel quite scary if you really push them on anything less than perfect roads. So I remember thinking, man, xDrive might actually make this better. xDrive might actually make the M3 and M4 better drivers' cars because it'll allow them to feel more usable and safer. And it turns out I was right. Now I'm just kind of cruising along to get to a better driving road, but it allows me a chance to kind of talk to you about this car without being distracted by driving it. See, this xDrive system is predominantly rear-wheel drive. It's very, very, very rear biased. And because of that, it never ever really feels all-wheel drive. It always feels rear-wheel drive. Even when the car starts to slide a little bit and you start to play with it, it still feels very rear driven. It just kind of feels rear wheel drive with some additional help. It's kind of how it feels, because that's kind of how it is. It's really only all-wheel drive when it detects slip and realizes that it needs a little bit of extra grip. There's actually another journalist video I'd like to point to, and it's Steve Sutcliffe. He drove the M3 xDrive on track, and even with traction control all the way off, in a full-blown slide, pedal to the floor, it just kind of held its slide perfectly. Even with traction control all the way off and no software nannies keeping it safe, the xDrive system is just so smart and so capable that you really don't need the traction control systems, but you can still have a ton of fun without killing yourself. It's a brilliant system. It works incredibly well. But I think what's even more important than that, because I think that's going to be a small subset of drivers that actually get to to not only get the opportunity to do that, but have the skill to do that. Steve Sutcliffe is an incredible driver, and he has access to tracks and things like that, whereas the average M4 driver is not an incredible driver, and they don't have access to open racetrack like that. So what's more important is how it feels in the everyday. And how it feels in the everyday is not even a tiny bit different than the standard rear-wheel drive car. The only upshot of this is that you get the extra grip for all of the time. So if it's raining out, or if it's winter and it's a little bit icy or whatever, you have that extra traction, you have that extra stability, which is a huge boost to your peace of mind when you're driving something with 503 horsepower. Now, it's especially welcome if you've driven the rear-wheel drive car and you know this thing can bite if it's just rear-wheel drive. Another benefit of the all-wheel drive system, and one that enthusiasts will appreciate quite a bit more than just some extra safety during the winter, is that the M4 xDrive is a lot faster. All right, we're gonna try to launch it at 3. Ready, go. Oh, wow, that's fast. 3.86 to 60, despite not having launch control. More importantly than straight line speed, though, is how this car feels when you actually drive it. Is the xDrive version less fun to drive than the rear-wheel drive version? And as I've already stated, no. The steering feels every bit as good as the rear drive version, and it kind of is shocking, actually, how good it still is, even with, at least a little bit of drive going to the front axle. And to be honest, it's been a few months since I've driven an M3 or M4, and I knew that it was so good to drive, and the front end was so sharp and direct, but it's so good to feel it again, because it is remarkable how sharp the front end of this car is. BMW's M division has done an incredible job with the front end response and precision. Now, the steering is still quite numb. It's still pretty vague, and I don't think it builds up weight as nicely as I would like it to in corners, but it's forgiven because of just how sharp the front end is. You can place this. There's a old expression, you can place it on a dime, but it's true with this. You could literally, I could find little pebbles in the road and just hit them. It's crazy. You could hunt out little pebbles in the road. It's just so precise. It's genuinely remarkable. There's just no downside to the all-wheel drive system. The chassis balance is the same. It feels rear-driven. There's no understeer. There's literally no understeer. This actually might understeer less than any other car I've ever driven. It's crazy how little the new M3 and M4 understeer, even this xDrive model. There's no understeer. The steering is just as precise. I see no downside at all to getting the xDrive system. And if you don't want to get it because, you don't want to look scared amongst your car enthusiast friends for getting the all-wheel drive model, don't worry, they'll never know, because there isn't a single badge on this car anywhere that says it's all-wheel drive. The only way you know that this car is all-wheel drive is if you dig into the menus and see the four-wheel drive, normal and four-wheel drive sport, two-wheel drive modes. Unless you dig into the menu, there is no way of knowing. It's fantastic. It's perfectly hidden. So you have all of the grip, the extra power, the performance, but zero downsides. The only downside, I guess, is that it's a little bit more money. It's a couple of $1,000s more. Of course, this is still a BMW M4, xDrive or not. And that means that everything about the way it drives is excellent. It's not just the steering, it's not just the balance. It's literally everything. Firstly, the engine is just so powerful. It is an absolute monster. It just pulls hard in every single gear at any RPM. It's just fantastic to use. To be honest with you, I don't love the way it sounds, though. That's my only gripe with this engine, is it kind of just sounds like generic 6-cylinder engine noise. Like, there's no real character to it, and it's fine. Like, it's not bad, it's fine. But it's just, that's it, that's just fine. And in a car as special as this, I wish it sounded a little bit more special, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal. I can live with that. The engine's so good to use, I'm okay that it doesn't sound special. Transmission, ZF 8-speed, the only option with the all-wheel drive system. It's the only option on the competition model, which this is, of course. And, you know, it works great. Downshifts are quick. They're not rapid-fire dual clutch quick, but they're quick. And it honestly doesn't matter so much because there's just so much torque. You don't really need to do a lot of shifting. You know, you don't have to downshift a ton to get the most out of it. It's just so punchy. There's a little bit of a slide right there. And again right there. It's so good. It's so good to drive. It really puts a big smile on your face. And that's the point of an M car. You know, if it can do that, who cares what the mechanical bits are underneath the skin? You know, who cares that it's all-wheel drive? It's a genuine blast to drive. It really is. Brakes are great. You know, real nice and firm, good pedal feel. BMW nailed the little things in this. The M Division nailed the little things. Seating position is damn near perfect. I mean, you need a supercar to get a better seating position than this. The seats are also incredible. These are the optional sport buckets with the carbon back, and they're great. Really, despite being super, you know, hugging, you know, they're really adjustable, they're heated, they're really comfortable. They're probably the best sports seat in the business, to be honest with you. You know, sight lines are excellent. The pillars aren't intrusive. You know, I can see out through my rear view mirror well. I can see in my side mirror as well. You know, looking around, I get a nice greenhouse. You know, the windows are quite tall. Classic BMW M sort of, you know, attention to detail when it comes to driver orientation and whatnot. Another thing that I like that BMW M did was that they didn't make this car overly harsh. So they could have made this thing just a brutal, you know, overly stiff monster. And it isn't. You know, this is a pretty rough road that I'm on, and it's not bad at all. I mean, it's not comfortable. It's not a luxury car, and it's definitely firm. But it's not harsh. You know, you feel the bumps, but it rounds them out pretty well. It does a good job of kind of keeping the harsh impacts out of the cabin. There's a little bit of road noise. You know, it's not the quietest car on the inside, but this is an M car. It's not supposed to be comfy and quiet. But BMW's done a good enough job of making this comfortable enough to use on a daily basis. Now, the M3 Competition is obviously the one you want to use as a daily because it's, you know, has 4 doors and a bigger back seat. It's more usable in everyday life. Having said that, I have a car seat in the back, and I had my son in the back yesterday, and we took a decently long drive in it, and he was comfortable. He was great. He loved it back there. Admittedly, he was behind the passenger seat, which there was no one in the passenger seat at the time, so I could move the passenger seat far up enough where he had enough leg room, but I don't think an adult would be able to fit in said passenger seat comfortably. Their knees would be pretty close to the dashboard. They wouldn't be very comfortable. So this, obviously being an M4, the 2-door version, is not the daily driver of the M3, M4 duo. The M3 is the far better daily. However, as a second car in your family, this could work in a pinch. You know, if you really had to take some kids in the back, I mean, the back seat's usable enough in a pinch for small kids. But I wouldn't recommend using it on a daily basis if you have to shuttle kids around and stuff. Having said that, there's a big trunk. There's, you know, loads of storage. You got a decent cubby there. Got a big glove box. Got some storage down here. Got a lot of cup holders. They all work well. You know, heated seats and all that jazz. It's a comfortable car to live with on a day-to-day basis. So if you don't have kids, it's a perfect daily. It's great, actually. You know, it's loads of fun. It's got all the toys, all the tech. You know, iDrive 7 and all that jazz. It's really good. You know, I would use this as a daily if I could. Actually, I would love this as a daily if I could. I don't think there's a better daily sports car for the money. I really don't. If you're looking for a purebred sports car, you can find better for the money, I think. Something like a C8 Corvette or a Porsche Cayman will be a better sports car for the money because they're purebred sports cars. You know, there's no compromise there. They don't have back seats. They're not based on standard cars. You know, they're purebreds. But when it comes to something that you can live with every day, that has, you know, back seats, like this has somewhat back seats, you know, like decent back seats, and a big trunk, and, you know, gets decent gas mileage, and it has all the toys and all that jazz. If you're looking at like an everyday sports car, I don't think there's a better one on the market. I mean, you can look at the C63, you can look at the Audi RS5, you can look at some cars like that, but I think this is better. I think it's better than all of them. And I think that's worth the high price, which this does have a high sticker price, and the funky grille. I think it's worth dealing with those things to have this, because it's a sensational machine. It's so good at everything it does. It's a brilliant driver's car. It's comfortable enough to live with every day. It's got all the tech. It's got you know, fantastic seats. Probably the best seats I've ever been in. You know, that isn't a supercar. It's an incredible package. It's a bit pricey, but I think you get a lot of money, or a lot of car for your money, even at that high price point. I'm really impressed with these two cars, the M3 and the M4. And most importantly, I think xDrive is the way to go. Actually, I'm going to say without question, xDrive is the way to go, because you get all of the benefits. You get the grip, you get the performance, you get the all-weather capability, without any of the drawbacks of all-wheel drive. It still feels rear-driven. It will allow you to slide. In fact, it helps you slide. It is an incredible achievement that BMW M has pulled off, and I think xDrive is the way to go. Absolutely. If I were to buy this, it would be, I wouldn't even look at the rear drive model. It would be xDrive only for me, because you can have your cake and eat it too, in one of those rare automotive instances. And I know this is the one. Get the all-wheel drive model. It's just better. So for probably the first time in my entire life, I've actually been right about something. The BMW M4 xDrive Competition is actually better than the rear-wheel drive version. It's grippier, it's faster, it's safer, it's better in all weather, and you can't tell the difference between it and the rear drive version on the road. Maybe on the track, the little bit of extra weight might make the rear-wheel drive one more fun, but after seeing what, you know, professionals were better than me, the xDrive version is actually a little bit better to drive, even on track. And it's not that much more expensive. If I were to buy one of these cars, no question, it would be the xDrive version. It might be, you know, against what the purists want, but it's just better. It really is.